The story begins during the era of the Joseon Kingdom. A demon persuades a desperate-looking man to make a wish as long as he is willing to sign a contract with him. The man agrees, and the demon grants his wish so that he can live without ever suffering from hunger again. However, as the price, the man will die 10 years later from heart disease, and his soul will descend into hell. The demon, named Guwon, continues carrying out his duty of persuading humans who wish to sell their souls in exchange for a wish. One question he always asks is, why do humans who lose themselves because of worldly desires always blame demons, when in reality they commit evil because of their own ambition? 200 years later, Guwon arrives in the modern era. He has not aged at all and decides to live in a foundation called Sunwall, a cultural house that he manages together with his servant. Guwon never grows tired of his duty. He is very proud of his eternal life and never struggles thanks to his extraordinary magical powers. On one occasion, Guwon goes to meet a mafia man who once made a contract with him. The man has obtained the power and wealth he desired, and now the time has come for him to go to hell. Meanwhile, a woman named Dohee wins the Best CEO award in 2023. Dohee is the heir to Mirai Group, one of the leading companies in Korea. She is an extraordinary woman who is not only beautiful, but also very intelligent. However, behind her successful career, many dangerous people are targeting her in a struggle for power. The only person she truly trusts is her adoptive mother, Jo Kun-suk, who is now very old and whose health continues to decline. Her adoptive mother loves Dohee deeply and constantly urges her to get married. But her efforts always fail because Dohee, who is a workaholic, has never been interested in romance. Until one day Dohee is forced to attend a blind date arranged by her mother. Reluctantly, she goes to the meeting place, but due to a mistake, she ends up meeting Guwon instead and assumes that he is her blind date. Although Dohee finds Guwon handsome, she has no interest in starting a relationship with him. She deliberately behaves carelessly to give him a bad impression. Guwon, who had been enjoying his time, becomes annoyed and responds rudely as well. Their meeting quickly turns chaotic and is filled with sarcasm. When Guwon's cake order accidentally falls and almost hits Dohee, Guwon elegantly protects her, making the woman feel the flutter of love for the first time. Blushing with embarrassment, Dohee goes to the restroom. She thinks Guwon prepared the cake as a surprise because it is her birthday, while in reality, Guwon ordered the cake for himself. But the situation becomes even more chaotic when the former mafia's subordinates arrive seeking revenge. They believe that Guwon is responsible for their boss's death. After defeating the thugs with his magical powers, Guwon becomes irritated and drives Dohee out of the restaurant, leaving her deeply disappointed. Because of this, she decides to close her heart once again. Dohee has far more things to worry about than a failed love story. Her parents passed away long ago, and she was raised by her adoptive mother, who is also the founder of Mirai Group and has no blood relation to her. The biological children of the family dislike the idea that Dohee, who is not part of their bloodline, might inherit the company, and because of that, they are eager to get rid of her. Meanwhile, the relationship between Dohee and her adoptive mother is quite heartwarming. The two of them often argue fiercely, yet it is clear that their bond is built upon genuine love and affection. The reason her mother insists on pushing Dohee to get married is so that Dohee can find someone who will stay by her side after she passes away. Dohee spends the rest of her birthday quietly reflecting by the beach. However, things quickly go wrong when she hires a private driver. It turns out that the mysterious driver was sent by someone to eliminate her. Fortunately, Dohee manages to escape and runs into Guwon, who agrees to save her, even though they have not made any contract. After dealing with the attacker, Guwon approaches Dohee to help her. But suddenly, the killer rises again and drives a car straight toward them. Guwon tries to use his power to teleport Dohee away, but it fails. With no other choice, the two of them jump into the water to save themselves. Both of them lose consciousness and later wake up on the shore. Guwon is confused because his powers have somehow transferred to Dohee, marked by the cross-shaped tattoo that now appears on the girl's wrist. The moment becomes strangely beautiful as time around them seems to stop, and Guwon simply stares at Dohee while holding her hand. After passing out from exhaustion, Dohee wakes up in the hospital, where Guwon has already been waiting to figure out what actually happened to his power. Guwon explains the situation to Dohee's secretary and reports last night's incident to the police so the culprit can be caught as soon as possible. However, Dohee assumes that her encounter with Guwon was just a dream. She believes she must have been drunk and somehow ended up getting the cross tattoo on her hand. Through this meeting, Guwon realizes that he can still use his powers whenever he touches the tattoo on Dohee's hand. Without his magical powers, Guwon cannot carry out his duties properly. He struggles when facing a wrestler who once made a contract with him, and the encounter ends in an embarrassing defeat. But a far more serious threat looms over him. Guwon will eventually burn and disappear if he continues to neglect his duties. His demon handbook offers no explanation about the transfer of his powers, leaving him increasingly anxious because he has no idea how to solve the problem. Meanwhile, Dohee begins to recall the events of the previous night when she was attacked. The assailant mentioned that the reason behind the attack was her adoptive mother. Confused by those words, Dohee immediately goes to see her mother and asks whether she has been hiding something from her. Her mother hesitates, but eventually answers that she has always been honest with her, and Dohee chooses to believe her. While they are talking, a man named Sokun stops by to deliver a report. He is the nephew of Jo Kun-suk and also works for Mirai Group. Sokun secretly has feelings for Dohee, but she sees him only as an older brother figure since they grew up together when they were children. On the other hand, Guwon orders his subordinate to investigate everything about Dohee. The servant, Bok Hyu, is actually the reincarnation of the man who once made a contract with Guwon during the Joseon era. In this life, he made another agreement to serve Guwon, which is why he is one of the few humans who knows Guwon's true identity as a demon. Through his investigation, Bok Hyu explains that Dohee's father was one of the founders of Mirai Group. Because of that connection, Jo Kun-suk felt responsible for taking care of Dohee after her parents died in an accident. Through her own hard work, Dohee eventually built her own food company, which later joined Mirai Group in order to expand its business. Guwon then decides to win Dohee's heart so that she will stay by his side at all times, allowing him to figure out why his powers have transferred to her. After meeting the girl again and activating his powers through her tattoo, he immediately goes to confront the wrestler from earlier and finally sends him to hell. Dohee is shocked and fails to understand what is actually happening. For a moment, she even thinks that Guwon might like her, but it turns out the man only wants his powers back. Guwon tries to confirm whether the transfer of his powers is related to water or not, and because of that, he suddenly pushes Dohee into the river. Dohee is stunned by his actions and begins to cry, asking why Guwon would do such a thing to her. She is still deeply traumatized by the events that happened recently, and the fact that many people are trying to harm her makes her life feel completely unstable. Through tears, she keeps asking what mistake she has made to deserve such treatment. In the end, Dohee leaves Guwon behind, while Guwon begins to regret what he has done. However, while crossing the street on her way home, someone suddenly tries to throw acid at her. Fortunately, Guwon arrives just in time to protect her. He quickly heals her wounds after touching the tattoo on Dohee's hand. Through this incident, Dohee finally realizes that the strange events surrounding her are not just illusions, and she begins to understand that Guwon is far from an ordinary human. Dohee reports the attack to the police, but she becomes extremely frustrated because there are no clear clues about the attacker or the motive behind the incident. Nevertheless, the police promise to do their best to handle the case. They have also obtained a sketch of the suspect's face based on Guwon's description from the previous attack. Meanwhile, the attacker, frustrated because the plan failed, begins preparing another scheme to eliminate Dohee. On the way home, Dohee suggests that Guwon should become her bodyguard so that he can protect both her and the tattoo on her hand. Guwon arrogantly refuses the idea, believing that his status is far above that of humans and that such a job would damage his pride. However, after escorting Dohee home and returning to his own place, Guwon surprisingly finds himself worrying about the girl. He cannot understand why, but the strange feeling continues to linger in his mind. After considering many possibilities, Dohee informs Guwon about the conditions on the night he lost his powers. It turns out that the incident happened during a full moon. Perhaps his powers will return if he experiences the same situation again, and the next full moon will appear in about a month. The burning process continues to haunt Guwon because he has not made a new contract with any human. In the end, Guwon is forced to accept Dohee's suggestion and temporarily becomes her bodyguard. After meeting Dohee, Guwon borrows his power through her and goes out to find humans who want to make a deal. After witnessing how a demon works, Dohee feels that Guwon is simply taking advantage of human misfortune for his own benefit. Guwon, however, feels no guilt because it is simply his duty as a demon. Unable to accept this, Dohee fires him from his job and walks away. However, in the end, she realizes that sometimes the deals Guwon makes can actually help the humans involved. Because of that, she decides to accept him again as her bodyguard. Their situation remains calm for a while, until one day Dohee discovers that her adoptive mother has passed away. One night, while crying, Dohee begs Guwon to save her mother. But he explains that demons cannot bring the dead back to life. Dohee is devastated, and Guwon, unable to do anything, can only watch her in silence. On the day of the funeral, Jo Kun-suk's children pretend to be sad as they pay their respects, while Dohee quietly remembers the moments she shared with the woman she loved like a mother. Later, the police gather the entire family and announce that Jo Kun-suk had taken a certain medicine before she died. Dohee immediately realizes something is wrong because her mother was allergic to that medicine and would never have taken it willingly. She becomes convinced that someone is responsible for her death. Despite the risk of damaging the company's stock value, Dohee refuses to remain silent about the matter. The tension rises even further when the lawyer reads Jo Kun-suk's will. To everyone's surprise, she has decided to leave Mirai Group to Dohee. Most people had assumed that Suk-min, the eldest son, would inherit the company, but that assumption turns out to be wrong. However, before she can officially take control of the company, Dohee must fulfill one condition. She has to get married within 1 year of Jo Kun-suk's death. If she fails to meet this requirement, all of Jo Kun-suk's wealth will be donated, and none of her children will receive any inheritance. Dohee takes this opportunity to take control of Mirai Group and repay the kindness of the woman who raised her. Without hesitation, she boldly accepts the condition left by Jo Kun-suk and suddenly asks Guwon to marry her. However, Guwon refuses Dohee's proposal in front of everyone, including the reporters present at the scene. Jo Kun-suk's children still cannot believe their late mother's decision, especially Suk-min. 12 years ago, he had a terrible experience with his mother when he crashed into someone while driving under the influence. At that time, his mother refused to protect him and allowed him to face the consequences of his actions. Suk-min's younger sister, Suan, is also unhappy with their mother's decision. She begins suggesting several ways they might still obtain the inheritance. Sokun even promises to help Dohee uncover the mastermind behind their mother's death. He shows genuine concern for Dohee and claims she is willing to do anything to support her. However, Dohee does not realize that Sokun's actions are actually driven by deeper feelings. To Dohee, Sokun is nothing more than a sister figure because they grew up together like family. Meanwhile, the news about Guwon rejecting Dohee's proposal quickly spreads across the internet. At first, Dohee tries not to care, but eventually the rumors start to bother her. She decides to ask Guwon directly why he refused her proposal. Instead of answering, Guwon asks Dohee a question in return. Why did she choose him among all the men who were present that day? Dohee falls silent and blushes, realizing that in that moment, Guwon was the only person on her mind. Perhaps without realizing realizing it, she has already begun to like him. Embarrassed and frustrated, Dohee quickly denies it. She insists that she was not serious about what she said and claims that she would never marry Guwon, even if he were the last man left in the world. Dohee talks about her late parents and how she buried herself in work to avoid feelings of sadness, guilt, and self-pity. Guwon tries to understand her feelings and carefully drives her home, allowing her to fall asleep during the journey. When they arrive at her house, Dohee reads a letter left by Jo Kun-suk, which makes her break down in tears. In the letter, Jo Kun-suk explains the reason behind her decision and apologizes for leaving Dohee alone to face her greedy children. She asks Dohee to find someone who can support her when she takes over the company and tells her that it is all right to walk away if the responsibility ever becomes too heavy to bear. After Jo Kun-suk's funeral ends, Dohee returns to work while Guwon continues protecting her as her bodyguard. Meanwhile, Guwon begins to recall more fragments of his past life when he was actually a human. He shares these memories with Bok-hyu, who also starts remembering parts of his previous life after being reincarnated. Bok-hyu feels worried because the return of those memories might mean that Guwon is slowly turning back into a mortal human. Guwon himself begins to worry about aging. However, the biggest problem he faces is the strange instability of his powers. Even when he holds Dohee's hand, his powers sometimes fail to appear, which leaves him extremely frustrated. Because of that, Guwon keeps holding Dohee's hand, believing it can recharge his power. Meanwhile, Dohee reluctantly admits that she has become a sort of power source for a demon for the sake of their shared safety. During a dinner event with the company employees, Guwon is asked why he rejected Dohee's proposal. Guwon casually answers that he does like Dohee, but then adds that just because someone likes pork does not mean they have to marry a pig. His answer completely ruins the atmosphere and the gathering quickly falls apart. Annoyed by his words, Dohee storms off and leaves Guwon behind. Soon after, Guwon is confronted by a group of mafia members who still hold a grudge over the death of their former boss and are determined to eliminate him. Without Dohee, Guwon is powerless and unable to fight them all at once. When Dohee sees him being beaten by the gangsters, she rushes in to help. Together they fight their attackers, almost like they are dancing through the chaos. It seems that Guwon has started to fall for Dohee. After the incident, the two teleport back to the apartment. Without saying much, Guwon lets go of Dohee's hand and leaves immediately. His heart is pounding wild, and he is deeply confused because no human has ever made him feel this way before. At Sunwol Foundation, Guwon meets Gayong, another human who recognizes his true identity as a demon. Gayong is a famous traditional dancer with a beautiful appearance, and she admires Guwon more than anything. After learning that Guwon has become Dohee's bodyguard, she becomes very jealous and keeps questioning the situation. One day, she finally gets the chance to meet Dohee, who comes to Sunwol Foundation to check on Guwon after he suddenly left without any explanation. Their meeting becomes very tense. Gayong suddenly acts sweet toward Guwon, which makes Dohee misunderstand the situation and think that they are a couple. Guwon still cannot believe that he might be falling in love, so he keeps acting cold toward Dohee to protect his own feeling. For the second time, Dohee tries to open her heart, but Guwon's cold attitude leaves her disappointed. Even though he acts cold, Guwon secretly calls someone to make sure that Dohee returns home safely. Meanwhile, the police have made no progress at all. The killer is still roaming free, and it seems he works for someone who calls him the Executor. With his magical power, Guwon could have found the Executor by recalling his face, but because the man always wears a mask, Guwon has difficulty tracking him, and this becomes a major obstacle in their investigation. The Executor begins to grow suspicious of Guwon, who always ruins his plans. He starts investigating him and realizes that Guwon is not an ordinary human, proven by CCTV recordings that always malfunction whenever Guwon uses his magical power. Nevertheless, he reports this discovery to his boss and prepares another plan to eliminate Dohee. Taking advantage of a moment when Dohee is not under protection during a company meeting, Suk-min surprisingly manages to convince the shareholders to support him, temporarily making him the leader of Mirai Group. This situation forces Dohee to act quickly, and she immediately begins searching for a husband so she can take over the company as Jo Kun-suk had wished. During the dating process, Guwon starts to show jealousy, and he becomes even more irritated when Dohee directly asks the man she meets to marry her. Guwon keeps acting indifferent and claims he no longer cares about whatever Dohee does. Clearly, Dohee is not happy about marrying someone else, but she feels she has no other choice. Guwon's jealousy makes his emotions unstable, and as a demon, he does not know how to deal with such feelings. Furious, Guwon vents his anger on the mafia who have been hunting him all this time. He shows them a sketch of the executor and threatens to hurt them if they refuse to help him find the man. Dohee is shocked to see Guwon's cruel side and refuses to lend him her power again. Angry at each other, they decide to stop working together and go their separate ways. The executor takes advantage of this situation and finally manages to break into Dohee's apartment. He ties her up on the balcony, and after knocking her unconscious, Dohee wakes up begging for mercy as the executor happily cuts the fabric holding her above the height. Fortunately, Guwon once again arrives at the last moment to save her. He receives the emergency signal Dohee sent before she fainted, and this incident proves that Guwon cannot ignore the woman he loves. Dohee cries and hugs Guwon tightly in gratitude. Meanwhile, Sokun, who also receives the emergency signal, arrives at the apartment and becomes uneasy, seeing the woman he loves embracing another man. Dohee explains everything that happened to Guwon and Sokun. According to her, the executor did not simply want to kill her because he seemed extremely delighted to see her on the brink of death. Through this incident, Guwon and Dohee finally realize that the executor uses masks to change his face, making him very difficult to track. Sokun thanks Guwon for saving Dohee, but he still does not fully trust him. Not wanting to leave the woman he loves in danger, Sokun confidently asks Dohee to marry him. At that exact same moment, Guwon also proposes to her, leaving Dohee completely confused and unable to give any answer. Sokun moves first. He sincerely confesses his feelings to Dohee, but unfortunately the girl does not feel the same way and only sees him as family. After the rejection, Sokun talks to Guwon and asks why he suddenly wants to propose to Dohee after rejecting her some time ago. Guwon simply explains that he is not playing with his feelings and is already certain that he wants to marry Dohee. Sukmin begins a new project for Mirai Group. Dohee appears at the project's opening ceremony and publicly announces the date of her wedding. Everyone is shocked, and it clearly feels like a declaration of war. Dohee knows that the people who most want to get rid of her are among the children of Jo Kun-sok, and she is ready to face them all. Her trusted secretary, Dae-jong, carefully prepares everything for the wedding day. Dohee imagines herself speaking with her mother, who blesses her and seems happy that she is finally getting married. The man she chooses is Guwon. However, their marriage is not truly based on love. Guwon proposes because he does not want Dohee to die, and the two of them agree to enter a contract marriage that will end once both of them achieve their goals. When Dohee defeats her enemies and Guwon regains his power. While Sokun slowly accepts Dohee's decision, Gayong cannot seem to accept it. After all, she truly likes Guwon. After a long and exhausting day, the newlyweds sleep in separate rooms, and there is still an awkward atmosphere between them. The next morning, Guwon realizes that he is falling even deeper for Dohee, who looks adorable even without makeup. Among the children of Jo Kun-sok, Dohee is very suspicious of Sukmin. However, Sukmin's only son, Do-gyong, also shows strange behavior, and she decides to investigate him first. Although he is not obsessed with wealth, Do-gyong suffers from mental health problems and regularly visits a psychiatrist. For some reason, he dislikes his grandmother, and his relationship with Dohee is also not good, which makes it reasonable to suspect that he might want to get rid of her. With Guwon's help, Dohee follows Do-gyong almost the entire day, until he heads to a storage locker at a subway station. Do-gyong realizes someone is following him after noticing two heads popping out from a photo booth at the station. He approaches the booth, but Guwon's power does not work because he cannot teleport. To remove suspicion, Guwon suddenly kisses Dohee, and the unexpected kiss leaves her completely shocked. After opening the curtain, Dohee leaves without any suspicion. It seems that he is indeed planning something, though they still do not know what. Pretending that the kiss meant nothing, Dohee acts casually, while Guwon secretly takes a photo of them before she can notice. Their investigation leads to nothing, and they soon leave the station. At the terminal, they encounter an old female beggar. Interestingly, she is modern enough to accept donations through bank transfers under the name Jesus Company. Clearly, she is not an ordinary beggar. Because she understands Guwon's unstable condition, she even warns him that something unstable will sooner or later collapse and die. Guwon is still not ready to admit that he feels a strange warmth toward Dohee. It is love, but he does not realize it. Guwon assumes that the feeling will disappear once he regains his power. For the first time after their marriage, Guwon sleeps in the same bed with Dohee, constantly holding her hand to recharge his strength. Believing that this will solve the problem of his unstable power, the two of them lie awake at first, both claiming they cannot sleep. Yet eventually they fall asleep peacefully, and the next morning they wake up quietly, looking at each other. Meanwhile, Guwon, who is still heartbroken, goes out drinking. She recalls the first time she met Guwon. Back then, she was still a young girl who was often treated harshly by her father. Guwon appeared and saved her when he came to collect her father's life through a contract. After that, Guwon begged Guwon to take her with him, but he refused. She then promised that one day she would meet him again, and despite the difficulty, she eventually managed to do so. Now, to ease her broken heart, Guwon drinks heavily and ends up getting into a fight with a rude man on the street. Fortunately, Guwon appears once again to save her and brings her home safely. Guwon reassures Guwon that his marriage with Dohee is only a fake arrangement and asks her not to worry. Meanwhile, Sokun begins investigating Guwon and looks into everything related to Sunwall Foundation, which surprisingly has existed for decades. To his shock, he finds an old photograph showing Guwon's face, and it makes no sense to him that Guwon has not aged even a little. Worried that something might happen to Dohee, he explains the situation to her. Unfortunately for him, Dohee already knows Guwon's true identity and claims that the man in the photo is simply Guwon's grandfather. When Sokun directly asks Guwon whether he is human or not, Guwon tries to deny the suspicion, but Sokun warns that he will continue searching for the truth. A new problem arises when a social media influencer spreads a hoax, claiming that Dohee murdered Jo Kun-suk in order to inherit her wealth. Guwon immediately uses his powers to capture and threaten the influencer, forcing him to delete all the false news. Dohee already knows that Sukmin is the mastermind behind the rumor, and she goes to confront him directly. Although Dohee is in a weak position because she lacks strong supporters, the presence of Guwon, who is a demon, is enough to give her the courage and strength to fight back. At Sunwall Foundation, Guwon receives troubling news that his demon guidebook has gone missing. Even worse, he does not realize that the executor has secretly infiltrated the place and planted a listening device, allowing him to hear every conversation about the demon's powers. It is also the executor who stole Guwon's guidebook. Through an online game, the executor quickly reports to his superior that Guwon is truly a demon. Shockingly, Dohee is seen communicating with the executor, confirming that he is indeed involved in the plan to kill Dohee. However, their plan now seems to change, as the executor agrees that Guwon should be eliminated first. Dohee and Guwon decide to return home, but they are surprised when a group of mafia members suddenly arrives at Sunwall Foundation. However, this time, they do not come as enemies. Instead, they ask Guwon to become their leader and swear their loyalty to him. After witnessing how powerful he is, the mafia members are deeply impressed and wish to devote themselves to serving him. Guwon agrees, but he asks them not to follow him everywhere. That night, when Guwon is away from home, Dohee is arrested for the murder of Madam Jo Kun-sok. So-kun stays by her side and encourages her to remain strong because he knows she is innocent. When Guwon hears the news, he rushes to see Dohee. But in his haste, he becomes careless and is suddenly stabbed by the masked assassin who has been waiting for him. As Guwon collapses helplessly, Dohee anxiously waits for him at the police station. While Guwon is helpless, Bok-hyu arrives just in time to save him. He pushes the attacker, causing half of the mask to fall off. Guwon manages to see part of the assassin's face before the executor escapes. Meanwhile, reporters begin to gather to cover the news of Dohee's arrest. Guwon is rushed to the hospital, and the doctor informs Bok-hyu and Gayong that Guwon's condition is extremely critical and his chances of survival are very small. At the police station, the news of Guwon's stabbing reaches Dohee. A kind-hearted police officer who believes in her innocence secretly helps her slip away to visit Guwon at the hospital. When Dohee arrives, Gayong angrily attacks her and blames her for everything that happened. Bok-hyu drags Gayong away and allows Dohee to remain by Guwon's side. So-kun notices that Dohee keeps giving her hand to Guwon and finds the gesture rather strange. Fortunately, although he has not fully recovered, Guwon slowly regains consciousness. Dohee embraces him with overwhelming relief. The arrest warrant against Dohee is later reviewed and canceled because there is no evidence against her. Now she can stay at the hospital to take care of her husband, and she is surprised to see the mafia members faithfully guarding their new boss. After returning home, Guwon spends his recovery period holding Dohee's hand and constantly hugging her. No medicine seems capable of healing him except that warm embrace. And slowly their relationship begins to grow into something sweet and romantic. Meanwhile, Do-gyong receives a message from the executor informing him that Guwon has seen half of his face and will surely come for him soon. In panic, Do-gyong hides in his room, waiting for the death he believes is coming. After things calm down, Gayong visits Dohee at her office and demands that she stop using Guwon. She calls Dohee selfish and says she should clean up her own mess. According to Gayong, Dohee is a magnet for trouble and the reason Guwon has been dragged into this deadly chaos. That night, Dohee keeps thinking about Gayong's words and imagines meeting the spirit of her mother, Jo Kun-sok. She pours out her frustration, explaining that she wants to seek justice for her mother and honor her wishes, but at the same time she wants to protect Guwon. Her mother advises her to protect and cherish the living, telling Dohee that she must do what is best for herself. In the end, Dohee decides to give up the fight for Mirai Group, much to the delight of Sukmin and his greedy siblings. When Guwon hears about this decision, he demands an explanation. Dohee coldly says that she no longer trusts someone who cannot even protect himself. Hurt by her words, Guwon later approaches So-kun and asks why Dohee is distancing herself from him. Frustrated, So-kun reveals the truth. Dohee gave up everything just to protect Guwon. All her life, she has lost the people she loved, and she cannot bear to lose another one. After learning the truth, Guwon tracks Dohee down and finds her in the garden that once belonged to the late Jo Kun-sok. Dohee once again insists that Guwon will die if he continues to involve himself in her war, but Guwon does not care. Instead, he gently kisses her. After everything they have been through, Guwon and Dohee return home and finally embrace their marriage for real, losing themselves in a passionate and heartfelt romance. The next morning, Guwon becomes determined to act like the perfect husband. He refuses to use his powers for convenience so that their relationship can feel more natural. In the midst of their happiness, Dohee helps Guwon better understand humans and their emotions. Meanwhile, the second child of Jo Kun-sok secretly follows Dohee, suspecting that she must be planning something after giving up Mirai Group so easily. Unfortunately for him, he finds nothing suspicious, only the sight of a loving and happy married couple. Elsewhere, Sukmin orders the shareholders to accelerate the meeting to elect a new chairman. He also warns his son not to cause trouble for the sake of their public image. Through a flashback, Sukmin remembers the night his mother was involved in a bloody accident. She frantically washed him while telling him that he needed to cleanse himself of his sins. She always claimed that she had given birth to a devil because her eldest son lived in darkness, recklessly treating human lives as if they meant nothing. Perhaps that is why she never showed affection toward her children and seemed to cast them aside. Those memories awakened Sukmin's darkest side, pushing him to live exactly as the devil his mother always called him. After things calmed down for a while, Guwon asks Dohee to fight again against the children of Jo Kun-sok. However, she refuses because she already feels happy with her life now. Guwon respects her decision, but before Dohee officially gives up her inheritance, he suggests that they first find the executor to bring justice to Jo Kun-sok. Since Guwon has already seen half of the executor's real face, he updates the composite sketch at the police station and begins the hunt. But because his powers remain unstable, he cannot capture the man alone, so he asks the mafia to help track him down. Their hard work finally paid off when the executor's hiding place was discovered, and the police immediately headed to the location. Unfortunately, when they arrived, the executor was already found dead at the hideout. It was later revealed that the mastermind behind all the chaos was Sukmin. He was also responsible for the death of his own mother. All this time, the person who had been giving orders to the executor was Sukmin. The executor was extremely loyal to him because Sukmin was the one who helped him escape from prison. Dohee actually had nothing to do with the murders, but for some reason he secretly tapped his father's phone. Because of that, he was able to read all the interactions between Sukmin and the executor, including the truth about Guwon. Sukmin eventually killed the executor because he no longer needed him, believing that the Murray group had already fallen completely into his hands. Guwon concluded that the real mastermind was still out there and that they needed to find him. However, in the middle of this critical situation, his powers suddenly disappeared completely. He returned to Sunwol, and all of his contracts with humans were suddenly burned away. His entire world collapsed before his eyes and turned to ashes. As the ashes scattered, it marked the beginning of his life as an ordinary human. Afraid of what would happen to him, Guwon visited the beggar woman he had met before and took her to a restaurant. The beggar then revealed her true identity and said that she was the one who had granted Guwon his demon powers. Some people call her God or the Almighty. Guwon asked if there was any way for him to regain his powers. Unfortunately, the answer from God created another dilemma. Guwon's powers had become unstable and would disappear because they were in the wrong hands. Technically, Guwon could regain his powers if Dohee died. According to the rules, humans must lose one thing in order to gain another. However, God emphasized that even though the rules exist, every decision ultimately belongs to humans. Meanwhile, Sokun's investigation about Guwon's true identity eventually led him to Gayong, and he finally discovered that the man was actually a demon. Gayong lied and said that Guwon had no good intentions toward Dohee. She explained that Guwon only approached Dohee because of the cross tattoo, which was the source of his power. Gayong did this so that someone else would at least try to ruin their relationship, proving that she had begun to develop an unhealthy obsession with the demon who once saved her. After hearing Gayong's explanation, Sokun became extremely anxious and started looking for ways to save Dohee. Meanwhile, Sukmin finally got what he wanted. Dohee had officially handed over her inheritance, but apparently that still wasn't enough to satisfy his ambition. Sukmin eventually discovered that his son Dohee had secretly tapped his phone. Furious, he brutally abused his own son. As a father, Sukmin always wanted his son to be reliable, so he raised him very harshly. However, Dohee could never meet his expectations. That situation made him hate Dohee because he could never surpass her achievements and success. The immense pressure destroyed Dohee's mental health, turning him into someone who easily harbored hatred even toward his own family members. In the end, Dohee tried to understand his father's lifestyle by tapping his phone, hoping that he could finally meet his expectations and earn his recognition. Unfortunately, everything went wrong, and his mother, who knew about the situation, could only remain silent because she was too afraid to oppose Sukmin. After thinking carefully about his choices, Guwon returned home to spend time with Dohee. They baked a cake and watched movies together. The full moon was approaching, and Guwon was terrified that Dohee might die if his powers truly returned. Because of that fear, he decided to give up his powers and leave his current life behind. However, his resolve wavered after he heard Dohee talking in her sleep, asking him to stay. In the end, Guwon visited God and explained that he had made a decision about his fate. He followed God's earlier words that even though rules already exist, humans can still make their own choices. With that principle in mind, Guwon decided not to give up his power and instead do everything he could to save Dohee. The next morning, Guwon told Dohee about the full moon and the way he could regain his tattoo. Dohee was happy because there was finally a real solution, and she suggested that they perform the transfer ritual while going on their honeymoon. Before leaving, Dohee worked for half a day and spent a lot of time planning the perfect honeymoon. However, her happiness didn't last long when Gayong came to visit her. Gayong understood Guwon's situation and how he could regain his power. Because of that, she handed Dohee a bottle of poison and asked her to die so that Guwon's power would return and he could survive. Guwon interrupted their conversation and angrily scolded Gayong. He told her to come to her senses and said that she meant nothing to him. After meeting Dohee and learning the truth about Guwon, Dohee decided to keep hoping and fight until the end alongside her husband. Guwon was deeply touched, and they finally went out together to welcome the full moon. On the way there, Dohee stopped by a convenience store. At the same time, Dohee, who wanted to prove his worth to his father, prepared to eliminate Dohee. He rammed his car into her and caused the convenience store to catch fire. Gayong, who had just arrived at the scene with Sokun, tried to stop Guwon, but he insisted on saving his wife. Sokun couldn't do anything because his hands were injured from the explosion. Guwon ran through the blazing fire and found a letter from Dohee. In the letter, Dohee revealed that she intended to sacrifice herself for Guwon's safety and hoped he would understand. Guwon collapsed after being struck by falling debris, while God silently watched the tragedy unfold. God wasn't surprised that the couple chose each other, believing that it is human nature and destiny to make such choices. When Guwon regained consciousness, he refused to give up and kept crawling toward Dohee. As soon as he held her hand, the cross tattoo finally transferred to him under the light of the full moon, allowing him to immediately save her. After everything that happened, Guwon became the happiest husband in the world. His powers had returned and his love was safe. Overjoyed, he even bragged to God and told Dohee that the beggar woman was actually his boss, though he didn't explain further. Everyone was happy about Guwon's return, including Gayong. However, she was worried because Guwon was still angry with her for what she had done to Dohee. Meanwhile, Sukmin was appointed as the chairman of Mirai Group on the same night Dohee had her accident. He was disappointed to learn that Dohee survived, and he soon visited his son in frustration. Sukmin considered his son a failure that could no longer be fixed, but he still wanted to use him. In the end, Sukmin planned to make his own son take the blame for the deaths of Madame Jo Kunsok, the executor, and even the attempted murder of Dohee. In the end, Dohee ended up in prison, taking the blame for his father, and he slowly began to lose his sanity. His fate was truly tragic, and his mother, Sarah, could do nothing to help him. Dohee didn't believe that Dohee was responsible for the death of Madame Jo Kunsok, but she couldn't do anything because that was how things had turned out. Meanwhile, Sokun finally accepted Guwon's presence and entrusted Dohee's safety to him. The relationship between Guwon and Sokun also began to improve. Gayong admitted her mistakes and apologized to Dohee. She even said she would accept it if Dohee wanted to curse or scold her, but Dohee was too tired to do that and simply wanted to forget everything. Besides that, Dohee believed that what Gayong had done was ultimately for Guwon's sake. For a while, everything became peaceful again. However, that peace did not last long, as Guwon began to be haunted once again by dreams from his past. In those dreams, he saw a woman named Walsim performing a sword dance. Guwon immediately went to meet God, hoping to find answers. As usual, God did not give a direct explanation, and only warned him that people who are destined to be together will find each other no matter what. Amid that uncertainty, Guwon eventually realized that the woman named Walsim in his dreams was actually Dohee in her past life. His dreams became clearer over time, and he was shocked to discover that in that past life, he had killed Dohee 200 years ago. Back then, Guwon lived as a human nobleman named Yisun. Fate brought him to Walsim, an entertainer from the capital who had recently moved to the village. Yisun wanted to know her better, so he pretended to study by the river just to secretly watch Walsim practice her sword dance. As days passed, Walsim could no longer ignore the handsome young man who kept seeking her attention. They grew closer, and Walsim confessed that she had been sent to the village because she refused to serve a powerful man in the capital. Walsim was not bitter about her life status. She simply wanted to live humbly and peacefully without causing trouble. She knew that Yisun could never marry her, and the best she could hope for was to become his concubine. However, her thoughts slowly changed as she spent more time with Yisun, who had begun studying Catholic teachings where the caste system did not apply. Those teachings became a source of hope for them, as they dreamed of a world where everyone could be treated with respect regardless of their social status. Yisun promised that he would marry Walsim after passing the state examination. As a promise that he would return, Yisun gave Walsim a cross necklace so she would remember him while he was away. Unfortunately, chaos soon erupted when the kingdom's officials began to grow suspicious of Catholic teaching, believing they threatened the royal authority. A brutal persecution of Catholics began, and many people became victims. The remaining believers were too afraid to fight against the royal soldiers. In the end, Walsim was exiled and later captured because of her connection to Catholic teaching. Walsim refused to reveal who had given her the cross necklace in order to protect Yisun's life. Because of that, she was sentenced to death. Sadly, Yisun arrived too late, after Walsim had already been executed. Overcome with rage and grief, the darkness within him awakened. He turned against the people who had sacrificed Walsim, killed them all, and eventually ended his own life. Guwon woke up from the dream overwhelmed with guilt over what had happened to Walsim. He blamed himself for introducing her to the Catholic faith in the first place. He also feared that fate might repeat itself and that he might hurt Dohee again. Guwon went to meet God again and asked why he had turned into a demon. God answered that it was the consequence of the sins he committed during his life as a human. Later, Guwon told Bokyung about his past and said that he would never tell Dohee about it because he was afraid it would only hurt her for no reason. At the same time, shocking news arrived from the police stating that Dohee had died. Everyone was shocked, especially Sukmin's wife, who was devastated by the loss of her son. According to the official report, Dohee couldn't cope with his mental illness and ended his own life. However, his mother suspected that her husband might be involved. During the funeral, most people still believed that Dohee was responsible for Madame Jo Kunsok's death, and only a few doubted that story. Meanwhile, the cruel Sukmin managed to escape all suspicion and became even harder to bring down. After visiting the grave of Madame Jo Kunsok, Guwon and Dohee went to the Sunwol Foundation to watch Gayong's final performance. The girl had decided to leave Korea in an attempt to let go of the man she loved and as a way to atone for all the mistakes she had made. She warmly accepted the flowers from Dohee and promised that she would never interfere in their lives again. Gayong delivered a fantastic performance, but it reminded Guwon of Walsim from his past. In the end, Guwon honestly confessed to Dohee about the people he had killed in the past. He admitted that he was afraid the same tragedy might happen again and make Dohee suffer. However, Dohee rejected that fear and said she didn't care as long as they were together. No matter what problems came their way, she was ready to face them. When Gayong's dance finally ended, Dohee and Guwon held hands, both believing that love would help them get through both good and bad times. For a while, everything was peaceful again. As a sweet and devoted husband, Guwon used his powers to prepare breakfast for Dohee. After that, they went to work together and started planning their first Christmas vacation. Sadly, on their way to work, they witnessed a terrible accident. The sight reminded Dohee of the death of her parents, which made her feel deeply saddened. That night, Guwon saw that his wife was having a nightmare. He entered her subconscious and changed the nightmare into a beautiful memory where Dohee could meet her parents and Madame Jo Kunsok on Christmas Day. Meanwhile, new problems began to arise when Sukmin started acting authoritarian within the company. The welfare of the employees was put at risk because of Sukmin's new policies that were created solely for his own benefit. Sokun strongly opposed those policies, but he was powerless because most of the shareholders chose to side with Sukmin. Dohee eventually confronted Sukmin and warned him that his greedy plans would only lead to the destruction of Mirai Group. Sukmin hated the fact that Dohee always opposed him and assumed she was doing it to avenge Madame Jo Kunsok's death. In the end, Sukmin revealed a shocking secret. He told Dohee that Madame Jo was actually the one responsible for the death of her parents. According to him, Madame Jo raised Dohee only to atone for her guilt and sins. Sukmin even said that it would be ironic if Dohee kept fighting to avenge Madame Jo Kunsok's death after knowing that truth. Dohee did not want to believe this, but all the evidence that Sukmin had began to shake her heart and mind. Meanwhile, Sukmin's wife, Sarah, discovered the demon manual that had been hidden in her house. When Guwon realized this, he appeared before Sarah and threatened her to reveal everything she knew about Sukmin. Sarah finally realized that Guwon was a demon, and because she was afraid of dealing with him, she decided to reveal the truth to the police. Meanwhile, when Dohee got into a physical fight with Sukmin, she was clearly overwhelmed. Guwon immediately teleported to save her. The situation became even more tense when Sukmin's guards tried to break down the door, forcing Guwon to move them to his favorite skyscraper. Sukmin remained calm because he knew that demons were forbidden from killing humans. However, Guwon said that he would torture Sukmin until he begged for death. Dohee asked Sukmin to turn himself in, but Sukmin arrogantly believed that his power made him untouchable by the law. Unfortunately for him, Guwon clarified that Sarah was already on her way to the police and had plenty of evidence to report him. Hearing this, Sukmin begged Guwon to make a contract with him. He wanted his crimes to remain hidden, but Guwon refused. With no other option left, Sukmin decided to throw himself from the building. News later reported that Sukmin had ended his own life, but his body was never found and Guwon could not track him. After things calmed down, Gayong visited Sokun to apologize and say goodbye. Meanwhile, the mafia gang tried to start a new life by opening a restaurant, and Sarah came to visit Guwon to return the demon manual. Dohee then asked Guwon for help to uncover Madame Jo's past. Their investigation led them to a priest who once guided Madame Jo in seeking forgiveness for her sins. The priest had heard all of Madame Jo's confessions and decided to tell the truth to Dohee for her own good. In the past, Madame Jo had been blinded by greed, which endangered the safety of her employees. At the same time, Dohee's father knew that his time was almost up because he had made a contract with Guwon 10 years early. Even so, he still wanted to fight for the workers' rights before dying by threatening to report Madame Jo to the authorities. Madame Jo tried to stop Dohee's parents, and an unavoidable car chase took place. Eventually, an accident happened when Dohee's father lost control of the vehicle. Dohee's mother died in the accident, and Guwon soon arrived to take Dohee's father's life just as he was trying to answer a call from his daughter. Madame Jo witnessed everything and became terrified when Guwon approached her. Not long after Guwon offered her a contract, Dohee's parents' car exploded, throwing her away and injuring her knee. Guwon's presence made Madame Jo realize her position as an ordinary human, and she regretted her actions ever since, believing that everything might have been different if she had not chased Dohee's parents that night. Dohee felt relieved knowing that Madame Jo was not responsible for her parents' death. However, the fact that Guwon was involved in the tragedy made her feel sad and afraid. Guwon heard her crying in the bathroom without knowing what had happened. He then visited the same priest who surprisingly could sense the presence of demon. Through that meeting, Guwon finally remembered that he had once met Madame Jo when he came to take Dohee's father to hell. The priest believed that Guwon would only hurt Dohee more and advised him to leave before things became worse. Guwon felt extremely guilty toward Dohee after failing to protect her in their past life. The contract he made with Dohee's father had ultimately caused deep wounds to the woman he loved. Because of that tragedy, Dohee grew up without the presence of both her father and mother. The deity who knew about this situation comforted Guwon and told him that those events had nothing to do with the fact that he was a demon. That night, Guwon waited for Dohee outside her office and asked her to take a walk with him. Dohee tried to remain calm even though there was a small sense of fear inside her. Finally, with a heavy heart, Guwon asked her to free herself from the disaster that was none other than himself as a demon. Dohee slowly released Guwon's hand, tears streaming down her face as she kept calling his name, realizing that her demon had left her. Days passed, and Dohee tried to stay strong. It wasn't easy, but she had a company to run and many responsibilities to handle. Meanwhile, Bok-hyu remembered his last conversation with Guwon, who had officially appointed him as the president-director of the Sunwall Foundation before leaving for a while. Bok-hyu then found Guwon's cross necklace, the one he had once given to Wal-sim in their previous life, and wondered if he should give it to Dohee to possibly change the situation. The mafia gang also mourned Guwon's disappearance and struggled to manage their new restaurant. Sokun, who was worried about Dohee, regularly stopped by to make sure she was taking care of her health. In addition, after going through many things together, Bok-hyu eventually started a relationship with Dajong, Dohee's loyal and dependable secretary. Meanwhile, Sukmin seemed to have survived after throwing himself into the river. He burned half of his face so Guwon wouldn't be able to track him and hid among the homeless. Carefully, he began planning his revenge while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Guwon had not truly left Dohee and continued watching over his wife from afar. Dohee missed Guwon deeply, but she refused to admit that she was suffering and feeling lonely. Guwon often visited her while she slept and cared for her with great affection. Even when Dohee got drunk during a company outing and injured her leg after falling, Guwon healed the wound on her knee and gently put her to sleep. Realizing this, Dohee began to feel that Guwon was still somewhere around her, and her longing for him grew heavier. Eventually, Dohee visited the Sunwall Foundation to remember her husband. There she met Bok-hyu, who gave her the cross necklace and told her that it might help whenever she missed Guwon. Dohee wore the necklace before going to sleep, which unexpectedly triggered her memories as Wal-sim, the entertainer who had grown tired of her life and was close to giving up. However, meeting Yisun gave her a reason to live. She eventually fell in love with him, and even after being killed for following the Catholic faith, she never regretted her choice. After seeing her past life, Dohee finally understood Guwon better. The fear inside her was completely natural. Being involved with a demon who was connected to her parents' death was not something easy, and it clearly caused her great emotional pain. However, after understanding Guwon and the reasons behind his decisions, Dohee realized that none of it had anything to do with the sincerity of their love. Dohee tried to find Guwon, but on the way she was captured by Sukmin, who threatened to kill her if Guwon didn't appear. Sukmin had become completely delusional and blamed others for his downfall, which made him desperate for revenge against both Dohee and Guwon. When Sukmin injured Dohee, Guwon finally appeared and was filled with rage. He could easily destroy Sukmin, but Dohee kept calming him down so he wouldn't cross the line. Unfortunately, that decision did not make Sukmin come to his senses. Brutally, he fired his gun at Dohee, killing her instantly and breaking Guwon's heart. After receiving a devastating attack from Guwon, Sukmin collapsed helplessly. While crying, Guwon recited a verse from the Holy Scripture scripture before exchanging his own life to save Dohee. His action defied God's fate, and he accepted the consequences with a calm heart as his body began to burn. Dohee woke up in Guwon's arms and asked if he was the one who saved her. Guwon smiled and told her that she had saved herself. Slowly, Guwon's body began to disappear, leaving Dohee in tears as she realized the painful truth that her husband was gone forever. After Guwon's death, Dohee sank into deep sorrow and could barely do anything. Bokyu, Gayong, and everyone who knew him also mourned his passing. The police eventually arrested Sukmin, but he only grumbled and kept laughing, believing that he had won and feeling satisfied with himself. After all his crimes were revealed, Sukmin was sentenced to death, meaning he would remain in prison until the day of his execution arrived. It was not easy for Dohee to let Guwon go. She had planned a beautiful Christmas holiday with him, but now all of it had become nothing more than memories. On Christmas Day, Dohee tried to make a contract with Guwon so he could return. The god who had been watching her felt pity and agreed to grant her wish without asking for anything in return. It was a gift because Dohee had lived her life well. Suddenly, Guwon appeared in front of her, and for a brief moment time seemed to stop as drops of water floated in the air around them. The two embraced each other with gratitude, knowing they had gone through so much and deserved a happy ending. Guwon was deeply grateful to the god for giving him a second chance. The god explained that he was moved by Dohee's sacrifice and their struggle to achieve love, which was why he granted the wish and restored Guwon's role as a demon. Guwon's return brought happiness to the people around him, especially Dohee, who decided to cherish every moment with him. Guwon eventually revealed that Dohee's father had once made a contract with him to save his pregnant wife after a traffic accident. Dohee was shocked to learn that the agreement had actually been made to save her life. She realized that the 10 happy years she spent with her parents were the result of that very contract. On one occasion, Dohee visited Sukmin in prison and told him that Guwon had returned. That fact made Sukmin extremely frustrated because in the end, he had only destroyed himself. His suffering became even worse when he began seeing visions of his mother inside the cell, which tormented him and nearly drove him insane. Meanwhile, Sukmin's wife, Sarah, tried to move on with her life and left the company. She had learned from her mistakes and decided to build a shelter for children who were victims of domestic violence. She did not want other children to suffer the same fate as her son, Guwon. Sarah apologized to Dohee and promised to become a better person. At the same time, Sukmin's younger sibling, Suan, also tried to live a better life before eventually leaving the country. Gayong visited her old neighborhood and met a young child who was being abused by his father. Gayong immediately protected the child, which reminded her of the past when Guwon had once saved her. In the end, she chose to stay in Korea and become a kind of guardian angel for the child. Meanwhile, Dohee entrusted Sokun to lead the Mireille group because she wanted to focus on developing her own company. The story ends with Guwon and Dohee living their days as a happy married couple. They also argue sometimes like ordinary couples, but they still love each other deeply. That is how they continue living their lives together. Suffering can make a person stronger, and gratitude makes it easier to feel happiness. Be patient and keep believing, because what is broken can grow again, and what is lost will be replaced. Life is a choice. Leave behind what makes you sad and hold on to what makes you happy. Without pain, a person would never become strong. Without disappointment, a person would never grow mature. And without loss, a person would never understand the meaning of sincerity. Everything may seem impossible until you finally accomplish it. Remember, nothing is truly impossible as long as you never stop believing and trying.